It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
I wouldn't have said yes to my parents. I was like, no, I'm working. I want
You'd
my own
rather
money.
push trolleys
Totally.
than have your parents tell you to wash the car.
I cannot tell you how much fun I had zooming around the shopping centre car park on trolleys at 9:30 at night. I mean, I was allowed to be there doing it. It was great.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the founder of happyfamilies.com.au and the parenting expert and co-host of Channel 9's Parental Guidance. I knew I'd get there eventually. I'm here with Kylie, my wife. We decided to take on something a little bit different today and answer the question, should my kids get a job? How can that help them with their mental health? That's the conversation for our discussion. Kylie, before we dive into the broader discussion around this, did you have a job when you were a teenager? I can't remember ever asking you this, but I don't remember you ever talking about it either.
So my mum actually worked for a family friend from home.
That's right.
And
Your mum was working remotely before it became a thing.
and I had the privilege of being able to work from home, so I never actually had to deal with a boss.
Well, your mum was your boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that work was, I think, what do you call it? Like
It was piecework.
So you basically...
Normally, I would be doing that in a warehouse, so it's warehouse work.
Yep.
Kind of packing and stacking. But we were able to do it from home.
Yeah, cool. I had more than one job when I was a teenager. I was pretty industrious. My first job ever, I was a checkout chick. Can I say that? I was a checkout chick at Woolworths. I did that for quite a long time. But I worked in a pizza shop making pizzas for Bruce's Aussie Pizza at East Gosford. Bruce's Aussie Pizza, how good is that? I just love the name. And he actually made really, really good pizzas. I was a delivery driver. I worked as a trolley pusher. I worked at a fruit and vegetable shop.
You worked at the charcoal chicken
I worked
place?
at the charcoal chicken. I stuffed chickens. My favourite thing, when people would come in to buy chicken and chips, sometimes they'd buy half a chicken. And I'd say, because, when you buy a quarter, you say, which quarter would you like, the wing or the leg? When they'd say I'd like a half a chicken, I'd say, which half would you like? I thought it was so funny. And they looked at me like I was some kind of a weirdo. It's just the kind of guy I am.
Chicken. Check out the chicken.
And I reckon I've had a whole lot of other jobs that I've just put out of my memory over the years.
And that was before you left high school.
Yeah, that was all while I was a high school student. I had so many different jobs.
Is that because you got sacked? Lots?
I did get sacked. I did get sacked a couple of times. But I think that's one of the we're going to talk about the pros and cons of your kids having a job soon. But I reckon that's actually one of the pros. I'll explore why that is in a sec. Economically, right now is one of the very best times. I don't think there's ever been a better time for our kids to go and get jobs. You don't have to have any prior experience. Employers are screaming for staff, and they're pretty much saying you don't need any skills. You don't need any experience. You can be a school kid. We'll put you on the minimum wage, and you can work part-time in the afternoons and after school and on the weekends. And there is such a demand for staff, especially for casual staff. And from a statistical point of view, fewer teens have jobs now than ever before. So teenagers are actually working less than they used to when we were growing up, or even 10 or 15 years ago.
Just listening to your big, long list of experience that you had before your 18th birthday, I'm kind of feeling like I missed out on a whole lot.
Yeah, and I can't remember all of those jobs, but when I look back on all the jobs that I had, I've got really cool memories of it. And what I learned from them, I actually think that it taught me a lot. And so we've encouraged our kids to have jobs, but a lot of parents aren't encouraging their kids to.
Well, my parents didn't want me to have a job.
So why? Why did your
They
parents
wanted me
say
to
no?
focus on my schooling.
Yeah.
And I think.
How did that work out for you, just incidentally? Do you know what I mean? Like we make this big deal, kids, you've got to do well, you've got to make sure you've got your schooling under control. But a lot of kids just don't actually, they don't care that much. And having a part-time job doesn't really interfere with it all that much either.
But I think that they were also parents who lived in fear, and they were concerned about the influences that I would be exposed to once I left the home.
Well, that is one of the drawbacks of having a part-time job, which we'll talk about in just a sec. Actually, why don't we do that now? Why don't we dive into the pros and cons of your kids working?
So why else do you reckon parents are stopping their kids from getting a job? It's not even so much that they're stopping. I think they're just not encouraging them.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I know several parents who have said to their kids, I will continue to give you pocket money because I don't want you to get a job. Like I'm aware of a number of parents who have taken on the responsibility, the financial responsibility of bringing their children through because they really don't want them working outside of the home.
As an outsider, just listening to that conversation, it's very easy to see how children grow up feeling entitled when somebody is just handing them over money.
Yeah, in each of the cases that I'm describing, the parents said, I don't want you to get a job. I'm going to give you pocket money, but here's the expectation. So there's been that. And the kids have been pretty happy to be compliant with it, which I find striking because I wouldn't have said yes to my parents. I was like, no, I'm working. I want
You'd
my own
rather
money.
push trolleys
Totally.
than have your parents tell you to wash the car.
I cannot tell you how much fun I had zooming around the shopping centre car park on trolleys at 9:30 at night. I mean, I was allowed to be there doing it. It was great. I think, though, that what we're seeing ongoingly, we're seeing increased pressure from parents towards kids and increased pressure on parents. There's a lot of ego involvement here in the sense that if our children aren't doing well at something or other, that it's a reflection on who we are as parents. The increasing fetishization and intensification of parenting, I think, is really driving this. Plus, there's a lot of kids, like you said, who are pretty content to sit back and say, yeah, cool, I'll just take your money and I'll just ask you for a 50 and a 20 or whatever. And parents seem to be happy to dish it out. I think with the current economic instability that we're about to face based on rising interest rates, inflation, that kind of thing, that parents might become a little less willing to hand over all the cash. But that's a conversation for another day.
Well, I was just thinking, based on my experience growing up and what people are experiencing these days, there is definitely a lift in economic stability than there was when I was a kid.
Yeah, we seem to be doing better as a community overall. That's certainly not the case for everybody, but there has been an increase in wealth as property's taken off, and so long as people are in the market, people are making more money on that kind of thing. Having fewer kids as well, and that's going to be part of it. So let's talk, Kylie, pros and cons of your kids having a job while they're in their teens.
Where do you want to start? Cons?
Yeah, let's do the
pros?
cons first. Let's do the bad stuff and then we'll go to the good stuff.
Okay. I think number one is actually the fact that it interrupts family life. And for parents who are already feeling time poor, the ability to get their kids from A to B or be awake at 10 o'clock at night when they finish their shift to pick them up.
So case in point, we've got a 15-year-old who's got a job at a local shop down the road, and once a week she has a shift that finishes at 10 p.m. And I am so grateful. I'm so overwhelmingly grateful that we have two teenage daughters who are now adults who say to us, yeah, you guys go to sleep. We'll be awake. We'll get her. And we're like, oh, thank goodness for that. Because we are gone by like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And the kids go and get that daughter and bring her home. But it does. It kind of messes up your plans. And at the moment, we're trying to plan holidays, right? We're trying to get Christmas organized and work out when we can disappear for a bit here or a bit there. And the kids are like, oh, yeah, but I'm not allowed to take time off work because in retail, apparently, even if you're a casual kid employee, you're not allowed to take the time off. So it's really, really, really complex in terms of the way it interferes with family life. Actually sucks.
Well, then, and that flows into kids' schooling. So like you said, we've got a daughter, finishes at 10 p.m. at night. That means she wakes up the next morning, she's exhausted, she's groggy, and she's not much good the next day.
Yes.
And it really does have an impact on her ability to kind of flourish for the next few days.
It's also the reason that each of the parents that I was describing before said, I don't want my kids working. I want them to concentrate on school. It's very important to me that they get the very best grades that they can, and having employment is going to take away from study time. Now, I disagree with that. I think that kids need to have that outlet. I think that's great for their resilience. There are so many advantages to having a job, but it's certainly a reason that a lot of parents will give for why they don't want their kids to have a job. And I can see how it could be a con. I think it's a legitimate con in some contexts. So we'll leave it in there. My big con is money. Like, it's great when the kids have got their own money, but it's a double-edged sword. Once they've got their own money, they're no longer accountable to you for the things that they're spending their money on. And you don't always know what they're spending it on, how much they've got, where it's going. And every now and again, the kids can utilize their money for nefarious means, for things that we might not want them to be spending their money on and might not want them to engage in.
Well, I guess that flows into the next thing, that it just opens them up to other influences outside of the home, whether that be people or, like you said, the additional money and affluence that they feel allows them to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be doing.
So I'm inclined to be dismissive of that because they're going to be exposed to external influences everywhere they go, whether it's a sports club or whether it's at school or whatever it might be. But Let me argue against myself for just a sec, because when our eldest daughter got her first job and she was working at Chico's at Fig Tree in Wollongong, when she was working there, she was not hanging around with other 15-year-olds.
No, and that's what I was about to say. At school, they're hanging out with kids roughly around the same age.
Loosely same age peers, yeah.
But now they're hanging out with adults.
Yep.
And
there
it's
were
a completely different playground.
a lot of young adults, sort of 18 through 25 in that environment. And all of a sudden our 15-year-olds like, can I just hang around at work until 11:30 because they're all going to...
Or I'm going to go to that party.
Yeah. I've been invited to so-and-so's 19th. And I'm like, no, you're 15. Like this is... And so you do encounter those. Having gone through that list, it kind of makes it sound like your kids getting a job might not be the best idea. Let's talk about the pros.
Well, there's actually a substantial list for the pros, because I think the most important thing our kids learn is independence. You know, they go from being completely dependent on us, and then we get to that 12-year-old, 13-year-old stage where they really start to buck the system. They want to be independent, but they still don't have the capacity to do everything on their own. By the time they're ready to get a job, they actually are at a point where they can start to be a lot more independent, whether that be catching the bus to get to work, riding their bike, walking down the road to the local store, if that's where they get their job. It really enables them to step up and have a sense of independence.
What else have you got on your list?
So the second thing I've got is that they learn financial literacy. It's about responsibility and accountability, and it plays...
Well, they need some oversight from us.
I was about to say,
You can't just
we
say-
have a huge part to play in that.
Yep.
But as our children have got jobs, sitting down with them, creating a budget, and while they actually don't know this, we actually kind of force their savings just because of the way we position things.
That's exactly right.
So we set up all their accounts and they, you know, pay board. We get them to pay themselves so they actually have a savings, and we're really stringent on that savings. Like it's actually an exaggerated savings account, because when you're that age, what do you actually really need to spend your money on?
Yeah, put as much money away as you can is what we tell the kids.
Number 3, it's another avenue for them to make friends, another opportunity for social interactions, which is so imperative
And
as
we've
a
seen
teenager.
that with every single one of our kids, haven't we? We've seen them actually really enjoy that social aspect.
Gain competence and learn new skills.
Yeah.
And like you said with your big long list, the reality is you kind of look at it and go, what did I actually learn? But you learn life skills, you learn people skills. So I guess the next thing on my thing is navigating relationships outside the home.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get to have a volatile blow up like you do with your sister in the bedroom because she wore your dress when somebody upsets you in the working environment. So the opportunity to navigate those relationships outside the home, I think, is probably one of the most important things they'll learn.
Yeah, and as much as we don't want our kids to have a toxic boss, a lot of bosses are not quite as nice and nurturing and gentle as we are as parents. And so they do get to experience what the world can be like. And our kids generally come home and say, I like it here. It's nice. You guys are nice to me. People are nice in this house generally. Like it's a good place to be.
As we've watched our older kids obviously go through a number of different jobs, watching their kind of processing, their mental processing as they kind of go, I really like this environment
Yes.
as opposed to that environment, and recognizing that they actually can pick and choose where they work.
So you've pretty much said a number of things that I had on my list. We haven't compared lists ahead of time, so I'm just crossing a few of mine off. Do you have anything else? Because I got a couple of things that we haven't touched on.
Oh, you're just show off.
No,
what have you got?
I'm not trying
What have
to
you got?
show off. I came up with a couple of things. That's all. Well, so I think, and one of the things that I love about what I've done is that I did so many different things, and I found stuff that I loved and stuff that I hated. I forgot I was a furniture removalist. Right? And I also worked in radio stations. I got a part-time job there. I worked in a printery, a print shop, doing laminating and printing and that sort of stuff as well. So, I mean, I had a lot of jobs, but I found the stuff that lit me up, the stuff that energized me. And
It wasn't the chicken shop,
no, it wasn't the chicken shop.
but you ate a lot of chicken.
Every now and again, I still think maybe we should open one up because it's pretty reliable income. But what I learned was to follow my energy. I also learned what it was like to not like something and then have to take a big deep breath and say, do I or don't I quit? And learning to quit, learning to have the courage to front up and say to somebody, this isn't working out for me. I don't want to be here anymore. That's a really important life skill. Another life skill is learning how to deal with the rejection of being fired. And yes, I was fired from a number of places, from Bruce's Aussie Pizza and the fruit shop.
Sometimes I wish Mum had fired me.
And the laminating shop. I wasn't fired from Woolworths. I think I was fired from the trolley pushing. How do you get fired as a trolley pusher. You learn the value of money in that you learn what it is to work for a minimum wage, and you discover how hard it is to save up for that thing. Like mum and dad might say, yeah, look, it's going to be tight, but we'll find the money, we'll fix it up. But when you're, as a child, as a teenager, when you're like, I want to do that thing and it's going to cost me $250, oh my goodness, I have to work for 25 hours or 18 hours or whatever it is to get that. That's like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks. That's a lot of work to be able to get that thing. So it teaches the value of money in some really great ways. But I really think one of the most powerful things is it just teaches you how the world works. Like if you want something, you have to go and ask for it. You've got to put yourself in the position for it. You've got to create the space where this can happen. So, and you know what? You start to appreciate your parents a whole lot more as well. I reckon that's a pretty good reason to get a job, because all of a sudden you're like, wow, my parents work really hard for me, and it's hard to earn money and it's hard to do all this stuff. And wow, that holiday cost how much? Or that restaurant meal that we decided to have as a special celebration for the family, that cost how much? Like, I would have to work a long time to do that. So lots of advantages, a handful of disadvantages. The one that we haven't talked about, I think it's good for mental health. Kids are doing something purposeful. They're outside the house. They're doing something that makes them connect with others. They're being physically active. A lot of the stuff that you need to be mentally healthy can be found in employment, even as a teenager. Now, I know sometimes jobs can lead in the opposite direction as well. Let's acknowledge that, but there's a lot of advantages, and that's my list.
Well, I think it's a pretty comprehensive list.
So if you've got kids that aren't working, I reckon send them out and get them into it. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media, with Craig Bruce as our executive producer. If you'd like more info about making your family happier, please visit us on our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families, or at happyfamilies.com.au.